In an 1860s Riga Hemp Heckler's workroom near the Daugava, the morning air smells of damp fiber, cold boards, and yesterday's ash. And you stand with us at the edge of the day. Settle into the slow rhythm of the work, because there is no hurry here, only the pull of hemp through iron teeth. The room is not large, but it holds a whole little weather of its own, with pale light at the window, straw dust in the corners, and a bench worn smooth where many hands have rested before yours. The 1860s Riga Hemp Heckler begins before the street has fully awakened, while the carts outside still sound soft and hollow on the stones. You hear a horse breathe in the lane, and somewhere beyond the roofs, a bell gives the hour in a tired, silver way. The Daugava is nearby, broad and cold, carrying the memory of barges, rafts, warehouses, and cargoes that have come downriver from far inland. Riga, in those years, is a port of fibers, timber, grain, tar, and patient men with ledgers. But here in this room, the trade has narrowed to a single bundle in your hands. You lift the hemp by its middle, and the stalks whisper against your sleeve with a dry, grassy sound, though the fiber itself carries a faint river smell from retting, as if water had been folded into it and never quite left. The heckle waits on the bench, a block of wood set with upright iron pins, some coarse, some finer, all polished at the tips by use. You can feel the tool before you touch it, because the whole day is arranged around its teeth. It will not hurry for you, and it will not forgive careless force, but if you keep the motion even, it will answer with order. Before the combing can begin, there is the quiet sorting, and we take our place beside the hemp, as if standing beside a sleeping animal. Some bundles are long and clean, the better lined fiber meant for stronger thread and cordage, while some are broken, tangled, or full of small woody chips. You shake each handful lightly, and chaff falls like dull gold onto the floorboards. It gathers near your boots. It clings to your cuffs. By the time the sun has climbed only a little, you already carry the smell of hemp on your skin. The work begins with the coarser heckle, because a fine tool would only snag and scald the fibers too soon. You throw the end of the bundle over the iron pins, draw it toward you, then lift and throw again, each pass opening the mass a little more. The sound is soft but exact, a faint rasp, a sigh, and then a thread-like scrape as the fibers separate under your hands. We follow the same motion again and again, not because it is grand, but because it is sufficient. The job is a conversation between patience and resistance. At first the hemp pulls back, holding its own knots and memories from field, pond, brake, and scutching board. Your wrists learn to loosen, because pulling too hard wastes the fiber and tires the body before the morning is half gone. You draw the bundle through, turn it slightly, and draw again, letting the heckle take what it can take. Tiny broken bits collect among the pins. Tow gathers underneath in loose, cloudy handfuls. The long fibers begin to hang straighter, less like a field plant, and more like something that may one day become rope, sailcloth, netting, packing, or coarse-woven cloth. This is the first part of the day, and it has a modest dignity, the kind that does not ask to be seen. The 1860s Riga Hemp Heckler is not standing at the center of a famous machine, and no one outside the workshop stops to admire the steady motion of the arms. But you can feel how necessary the work is, because every ship rope, every warehouse tie, every rough length of twine begins somewhere in the patient ordering of fiber. The world travels on small acts like this. The light grows stronger, though not bright, because Riga mornings often come with a veil of mist from the water and smoke from chimneys. The window glass is uneven, and it bends the street into wavering shapes, so that a passing cart seems to ripple as it goes by. Your bench is placed where the light falls from the left, and the heckle's pins shine briefly when the clouds thin. We stand close enough to hear the fiber catch and release. We stand close enough to know that the day has properly begun. As the first hour deepens, and the workroom warms by one small degree, we move from sorting into the measured labor of drawing the hemp finer, one handful at a time. The coarse heckle has opened the fiber, and now the Riga Hemp Heckler brings the bundle to a second comb, set with narrower pins, closer together, and more demanding. You pause before it, not because the task is uncertain, but because your hands have learned that every change of tool asks for a change of mood. The first comb is for persuasion, but this one is for discipline. You hold the cleaned end in your left hand, gather the loose length in your right, and cast the fiber across the pins with a little swing from the wrist. It lands lightly, then sinks as you draw it toward yourself, and the hemp gives a low tearing sigh that is not quite tearing at all. It is separation. It is alignment. It is the hidden order of long bast fibers being coaxed into parallel lines. We let the motion repeat, and after many passes the bundle begins to shine faintly, not like silk, but like dry grass under a pale sun. There are smells in this part of the day that belong only to fiber rooms and old workbenches. You smell the mineral edge of iron pins, the dusty sweetness of broken hemp, and the old oil rubbed into the wooden block so that damp does not swell it too quickly. Beneath those scents, there is the colder smell of the street, brought in whenever the door opens. Someone comes through with another armful of scutched hemp, and with him comes wool coat, wet leather, and the faint bite of the river wind. Riga itself seems to press gently against the walls. You can imagine the warehouses not far away, their doors broad and dark, their floors bearing sacks, barrels, coils and bales marked for merchants who speak German, Russian, Latvian, Swedish, or English, depending on the season and the ship. In the 1860s, the city still carries its older trading habits in its stones, and the Daugava is less a scenic river than a working road of water. Yet in the heckling room, these wide routes become intimate, because the empire's cargo is passing through your fingers. The human body settles into such labor by learning what not to spend. Your shoulders stay low, your elbows do not flare. Your hands grip firmly, then soften, because a clenched hand becomes a tired hand before the church bells find midday. We notice this together, the way workers notice what written instructions often miss. A good hemp heckler does not fight the heckle. You feed it, you turn the fiber, you let the pins do their slow sorting, while your own strength becomes almost quiet. Bits of tow collect at your feet, and they are not simply waste, though they are not the finest part either. The shorter fibers may go to rougher spinning, padding, caulking, or other humble uses, and there is comfort in knowing that little is thrown away without thought. The longest fibers are kept together, combed and recombed until they lie straighter, softer, and more obedient. The rest is gathered, shaken, and put aside. In a place where goods are weighed, priced, shipped, and bargained over, even the pale fluff beneath the bench has a kind of usefulness. Now and then, you stop to clear the pins. This is delicate in its own way, because the heckle holds broken fibers down near the wooden block, and you must lift them out without bending the teeth. A small wooden pick may help. Sometimes the fingers do it better. The iron pricks the skin if you drift, so your attention returns in a mild, practical way. Not alarmed, not hurried, simply present. The tool teaches you to come back to the moment. By mid-morning, the workshop has found its full voice, a low blended music of fiber, shoe soles, bench legs, distant wheels, and someone coughing softly into a sleeve. There may be more than one heckler working, and if there is, you begin to hear the difference between hands. One man draws sharply, another draws with long, even pulls, and one older worker pauses between passes, as if listening for what the hemp wants next. We stay with the older rhythm, because it leaves more room to breathe. It wastes less fiber. It wastes less of you. The morning work also contains small comforts, almost too ordinary to notice unless we are moving slowly enough. A mug sits near the wall, away from dust if possible, with weak tea or warm water gone lukewarm at the rim. A piece of dark bread waits wrapped in cloth dense and slightly sour. Your fingers, dry from hemp and dust, leave pale marks on the crust. When you eat, the room does not stop, but its sound seems to widen around you, and for a few minutes the work belongs to others. There is a particular fatigue that comes from drawing fiber, and it gathers not all at once but in small rings around the wrist, thumb, and shoulder. The Riga Hemp Heckler knows this fatigue as well as the smell of the room. It is not the exhaustion of a single great effort, but the soft accumulation of repeated gestures. You shift your stance. You roll the shoulders once. You return to the comb, because the bundle is not finished, and because finishing is made of returns. When the second comb has done what it can, The fiber in your hand looks changed enough that even a stranger might understand the work. What was tangled now falls downward. What was dull now catches light. What was full of splinters now moves more like hair. Coarse hair, perhaps, but still something that can be twisted, spun, and put to purpose. We hold it up for a moment, and the long strands sway almost silently. There is no applause in the room. The proof is in the hand. And as the morning wears on, and the first sorted bundles are laid aside in straighter, quieter lengths, we follow the Hemp Heckler of 1860s Riga toward the part of the day where the work becomes finer, slower, and more inward. The next stage asks for the finer heckle, and in the Riga workroom this tool is treated with a little more care, because its pins stand close and slender like a small iron thicket. You do not throw the fiber against it with the same loose confidence used earlier. You offer it carefully. The hemp must be ready, or it will snag and break. We feel that readiness in the hand, in the way the bundle slips more smoothly over the fingers, and in the faint silky rasp that replaces the rougher morning scrape. The finer comb does not make the hemp delicate exactly, because hemp remains a strong, plain fiber with its own stubborn body, but it refines the line, removes smaller knots, and draws the strands into something more even. You pass the bundle across the pins, draw it through, lift it, turn it, and begin again from another angle. The motion is so repeated that the mind can rest inside it. We are not escaping the work, we are resting within the pattern of it. A small haze hangs in the light near the window. It is not smoke, though there may be smoke in the air from stoves outside, and it is not mist, though Riga's dampness finds every crack. It is fiber dust, bright only when the light catches it. You learn not to breathe too deeply when the combing is heavy, and some workers keep a cloth close by, wiping mouth, nose, and fingers in the same absent way. The work marks the body quietly. It dries the skin, it roughens the nails, it leaves a pale line of dust where the sleeve ends. Now and then someone speaks, but not much is needed. A question about a bundle, a comment about the weather, a mention of a ship expected at the quay, or a load delayed upriver, or a merchant's clerk who counts too slowly. The languages of Riga mingle softly, and even when you do not catch every word, you understand the tones of working people beside one another. The room is not silent. It is companionable in a restrained Baltic way, with warmth stored more in habit than in display. The hemp itself has already lived several lives before reaching your bench. It grew in fields far from the port, was pulled and dried, then retted so water and time could loosen the fiber from the woody core. It was broken to crush the stem, and scutched to beat away the shives, those small woody fragments that still appear now and then under your fingers. By the time it reaches the Riga Hemp Heckler, much has already been done, yet this final combing decides how cleanly it may be spun. The last quiet step matters. Your eyes begin to sort almost without asking permission from your thoughts. A darker clump means damp. A brittle patch means overworked stalk. A rough, thick section may need the coarse comb again. We learn to see as the heckler sees, not with drama, but with a practical tenderness toward material. The fiber has limits, the tool has limits. Good work is often the art of bringing those limits into agreement. There is no romance in the splinters themselves, but there is a kind of honesty in noticing them. They lodge in cloth, pinch at the side of the finger, and sometimes sit under the nail until evening washing finds them. You rub the thumb across the finger pad and feel tiny scratches. You keep working. In the gentle light, the long hemp swings across the comb again, and the small pain becomes part of the background, like the creak in the floorboard or the smell of ash in the stove. Some bundles are meant to be better than others, and the heckler learns to respect difference without fuss. Fine, long fiber is laid apart, usually with more care and less dust, because it has higher value and better future uses. Coarser fiber has its own place, less graceful perhaps, but no less needed by warehouses, farms, boats, and workshops. We let that thought sit with us, because ordinary work often teaches this quietly. Not everything must be fine to be worthy. Near the doorway, a boy or younger worker may be tying sorted fiber into smaller hanks, his hands moving awkwardly at first, then more surely after correction. He is learning the way many learn such trades, not through printed lessons, but by being near the work long enough for its habits to enter him. He sweeps the toe, he carries bundles, he watches the older hands, and he hears the difference between a clean pass and a careless one. You remember being new in some room of your own life, learning by watching, not yet knowing what your hands would one day know. The finer heckling makes time feel strange, because the change in the fiber is gradual, yet complete by the end. A single pass seems to do little. 10 passes begin to show order. A long morning of passes makes a new substance out of an old one, though nothing has been added except attention. This is one of the deep comforts of repetitive labor, when it is held gently in the mind. The world may be wide, and trade may be complicated, but here improvement comes through emotion you can repeat. Outside, Riga continues its day without leaning in to watch you. The streets near the river take on more traffic, with carts carrying timber, sacks, barrels, and the daily goods of a city that belongs to water as much as stone. You might hear gulls if the wind turns, though they are distant and harsh compared with the room's softer sounds. You might smell tar from a yard, horse sweat from the street, or fish from a basket passing too near the door. All of it folds into the work. The Hemp Heckler's day is not only hands and fiber, but also posture, breath, and pacing. You cannot spend the whole morning bent too close, or the back will remind you before supper. You cannot hold the bundle too high, or the shoulder will stiffen. You learn little economies, the kind no overseer can fully measure, because they happen in the private agreement between body and task. We notice these economies, and we honor them, quietly, as part of the craft. By now the bench has become familiar under your palms. Its worn edge fits the heel of the hand. The block of the heckle sits heavy and still, fixed well enough that it does not shift when the fiber catches. There are knife marks in the wood nearby, old scratches, oil-darkened patches, and a place where someone has tapped a nail flat years ago. The room remembers workers through such marks. It keeps them without names. The fine fiber is gathered, shaken lightly, and aligned once more with the fingers. You pull loose strays free and add them to toe. You smooth the long line against your sleeve, though the sleeve is hardly clean enough to improve anything. Still, the gesture feels right. It is part inspection, part reassurance. The long hemp, combed and pale, lies across the bench in a tidy length, and the day has produced something visible from its repetitions. When the church bells move toward midday, the light changes in a way you can feel even before you look up. It presses less sideways through the window and more squarely into the room, brightening dust, iron, and the pale fiber laid in bundles. Someone straightens. Someone closes a door against a draft. The work does not end, but it loosens its belt for a little while. We have reached the middle of the day, and when the midday light settles over the Daugava and the workroom dust drifts more slowly in the warmer air, we leave the fine cone for a moment and follow the Riga Hemp Heckler into the small human pause that holds the day together. At midday, the 1860s Riga Hemp Heckler does not step into leisure so much as into a softer corner of labor, where the hands rest but the room remains full of fiber, iron, and waiting bundles. You may sit on a low stool or on the bench end, careful not to disturb the sorted hemp. The bread comes out again, perhaps with onion, cheese if the week allows it, or a bit of smoked fish wrapped in paper. The food smells sharper than the fiber for a moment, and that small sharpness feels almost bright. There is warmth in eating among work tools, though it is a plain warmth, made from hunger, habit, and the relief of not pulling anything through iron pins. You rub the thumb joints, then the wrist. You flex the fingers and see pale dust caught in the creases. We are still in the work even while resting from it, because the body keeps the rhythm a little longer, as if the invisible bundle continues to pass through the hands. This is how repeated work lingers. The room at midday has its own mild ceremony. Someone may open the door for air, and the outside enters all at once, with cart noise, hoof sound, river damp, and the mixed smell of smoke, mud, and horses. The city seems louder from the doorway, but not unkind. Riga is busy because its goods must move, and because every port is a place where many ordinary labours touch without knowing one another. The hemp heckler's work is one thread in that large woven cloth. Perhaps a clerk passes by, carrying papers under his arm, his boots cleaner than yours and his cuffs less dusty, he may not look long into the workroom. He knows bales, weights, grades, and prices, but he may not know the feel of a stubborn knot giving way under a comb. We do not resent him. He has his own ink stains, his own cold fingers, his own columns of numbers to keep straight by lamplight. In a working city, everyone carries some private burden. Still, the hemp room belongs most fully to the people who can read fiber by touch. You can tell when a bundle has been badly retted because it may smell sour, hold too much gum, or break in places where it should bend. You can tell when scutching has been careless because shives remain hidden inside and fall out onto the heckle. You can tell when the hemp is good because it opens with a firm smoothness that makes the work feel almost generous. These judgments are quiet, but they are knowledge. If the weather is cold, the midday pores may gather nearer the stove, where the heat is uneven and smoky, and one side of the body warms while the other still remembers the damp. The stove may hold a small iron kettle, and the steam makes the air smell briefly of metal and soot. Your boots dry at the edges. Your sleeves remain dusty. Outside, frost or mud may hold the street, depending on the season, because Riga has many ways of being damp. In summer, the pause is different. The air in the workshop grows thick, the fiber smells stronger, and the dust clings to sweat along the neck and temples. Flies find the window. The river gives brightness, but not always relief. You drink more water, wipe the face with a sleeve, and return to the bench a little slower. We can feel how the same job changes with weather, though the tool remains the same. A heckle in winter and a heckle in summer are almost different companions. The food is finished without ceremony, crumbs brushed into the palm or onto the floor, where they vanish among chaff and splinters. Someone says something mild that draws a brief laugh, not loud, not performed, just enough to warm the room for a breath. The laugh fades back into ordinary sound. A chair scrapes. The door closes. The pause has done what it came to do, and the day gathers itself again. Before work resumes fully, there may be weighing or counting to attend to, depending on the shop and the arrangement of labor. Bundles already heckled are tied, laid together, and sometimes marked so their grade or owner will not be confused. You handle them differently now because combed fiber can be disturbed if tossed carelessly. It wants to lie in its own direction. The long fibers are like a quiet river of pale strands, and your hands follow the current. A Riga hemp heckler's wage, like many wages, depends on arrangements that can vary by workshop, merchant, season, and skill. Some work may be counted by the day, some by amount, some under the eye of a master or middleman who knows both material and market. We do not need to fix every coin in the palm to understand the feeling of it. The work must be steady enough to feed a household, pay rent, replace worn boots, and leave perhaps a little for oil, soap, or tobacco. There is a domestic edge to the midday thought, even in an industrial room. You may think of a room at home of washing hung where it can dry, of a child with a cough, of cabbage simmering, of the price of fuel. The hemp does not stop for these thoughts, but it gives them a rhythm to move through. Pull, lift, turn. Pull, lift, turn. The body works, and the mind goes briefly to the people who will meet you after dusk. When we return to the bench, the first touch of fiber after rest feels both familiar and slightly new. The hand has cooled. The pins seem sharper for a moment. The bundle, waiting where it was left, has not changed at all. And there is comfort in that. Much of life shifts without asking, but a task set down carefully can be found again. The Riga Hemp Heckler knows this small mercy well. Now the afternoon's first work is often inspection because midday can reveal what the morning missed. You hold a finished hank toward the window and look for dark specks, woody fragments, uneven thickness, or tangled places hiding among the straighter strands. The light passes through the fiber unevenly, soft at the edges and denser in the middle. You shake it once, gently. A few loose bits fall, the rest remains together, and that staying together matters. The workroom sounds different after food. The first motions are slower, the talk a little lower, and the tools seem to wait for everyone to return fully to themselves. Then the old rhythm gathers. Hemp crosses iron, wood creaks. A cart rolls past. Somewhere, a dog barks twice and gives up. We settle again with the work, because the day is not made of beginnings only, but of returning and returning. By early afternoon, the smell of hemp has become so constant that you barely notice it until the door opens and a stranger's air comes in. Then you know it all at once, the dry green-brown scent, the dust, the water memory, the faint sourness of retting, and the oil of the comb blocks. It is not perfume. It is not unpleasant either, once you belong to it. It is simply the weather of the trade. This is the hour when a worker's skill shows in endurance more than speed. Anyone can pull too quickly for a few minutes, tearing long fiber into shorter waste and looking busy while doing harm. The better rhythm is steadier, almost modest, with enough force to draw the hemp cleanly and enough restraint to let the strands survive. You begin to understand that many old crafts are not secrets at all. They are balances held patiently in the body. And as the meal's warmth fades and the afternoon settles into the room with its dust, light and slow return of effort, we follow the Riga Hemp Heckler back toward the benches, where sorted fibers become bundles ready for the wider city. The afternoon in the 1860s Riga hemp room is the long middle of the day when the first freshness is gone and the ending is still far enough away that you do not lean toward it yet. The Daugava outside keeps moving whether you think of it or not, and somewhere near the quays, men load, tally, bargain, and call across wet planks. Here, the work narrows again to the space between hand and heckle. We stand there with you, in the plain center of the task. A new batch comes to the bench, rougher than the morning's better fiber, and you know it as soon as the first handful settles in your grip. It has more stubborn shive, more broken patches, and a smell a little heavier, as if the retting water had stayed too close too long. The coarse heckle must receive it first, and even then you cannot ask refinement from it too soon. You draw the fiber through, and the pins answer with a thicker rasp. The sound tells you what the eye has not yet fully seen. There is a patience particular to inferior material, and it may be one of the truest measures of a worker. Fine hemp flatters the hand, but rough hemp asks for steadiness without praise. You take smaller handfuls, you clean the pins more often. You set aside short tow and keep the longest salvageable strands together. We do not hurry past this, because much of daily work in any century consists of doing honest labor with what is less than ideal. The hand becomes kind by being practical. Dust rises more heavily from this batch, and the room seems to dry around you. It settles on the lashes and lips, and the tongue notices it before the mind does. You may turn your head slightly when shaking a bundle, not from fear, but from long habit. A worker who has spent years among fibers learns the angle of breath. In this, too, there is knowledge, small and bodily, carried without ceremony from one day to the next. The tools need tending in the afternoon. A loose pin must be noticed before it bends. A block that shifts must be wedged or fixed. Oil may be rubbed into wood, not lavishly, just enough to keep it from taking too much damp. You run a cloth over the pins and lift out trapped fiber. The heckle looks simple, almost severe, but it holds the day's success in its stillness. A poor tool makes poor patience harder. If we look closely at the bench, we see the geography of the work laid out in plain order. Rough bundles wait on one side, half-combed fiber near the center, finish line hemp placed away from dust and foot traffic, and tow gathered in a looser pile below. Nothing is elegant in the fashionable sense, but everything has position. This is the quiet intelligence of workshops. They arrange the world so tired hands can still find what they need. Outside, the city's afternoon traffic thickens, and you may hear the wheels more often now, iron rims meeting stones in a rhythm that passes and fades. The horses smell of wet hide and straw when they stand near the doorway. Men carry news in fragments, not the kind that changes history in books, but the kind that changes a worker's evening. A street is muddy, a shipment is late, a bridge is crowded. The price of bread is moved again. The Riga Hemp Heckler listens without fully stopping. The body keeps time with the comb while the ears gather what they want. This is one of the overlooked gifts of repetitive work, that it can leave a narrow path open for thought, memory, and overheard weather. You remember a song without singing it. You recall a face from the market. You think of the river ice in winter, thick near the edges, and dangerous only if a person forgets respect. Then the fiber catches and your mind returns to your hands. The process remains the same, but each bundle gives a slightly different answer. Some fibers slide free with a dry whisper. Some cling, twist, and require careful teasing apart before the next pass. Some leave the heckle full of short, broken toe, evidence of poor preparation earlier in the chain. The heckler cannot undo every mistake from field or retin pond, but he can reduce their harm. There is humility in that. There is also satisfaction. When the long fibers are ready, they are dressed by hand once more, smoothed and aligned before tying. You draw the bundle through your fingers, as though gently combing hair, feeling for knots, chips, or uneven places. The finished hank is not perfectly soft, but it is orderly. It carries a pale straw color, sometimes grayed by water and weather, sometimes warmer where the plant dried well. In the afternoon light, those colors are subtle, but a worker sees them. A merchant might call the material by grade, weight, origin, and value, but you know it by resistance, smell, and touch. You know which bundle asked too much of the wrist. You know which one opened easily and left little waste. You know which one should never have been sent forward so carelessly from an earlier stage. We stay with that knowing because old industrial work was often more intimate with material than later machines allowed. The hand was not separate from judgment. There may be a master or foreman who looks in during the afternoon, not harshly, perhaps, but with the measuring eye of someone responsible for output. He lifts a hank, tests the length, checks for shive, and rubs fiber between thumb and finger. His approval may be only a grunt. His disapproval may be just as brief. The work accepts this economy of speech. Long explanations are rare where material can speak for itself. Still, the hemp heckler's pride is real, though it stays quiet. Pride lives in the clean fall of finished fiber, in a pile of tow kept properly apart, in tools left ready, in a day's labor that can be touched and weighed. It is not vanity. It is the knowledge that your hands did not make needless waste. You were entrusted with tangled matter and returned it straighter than you found it. That is enough for many days. As the afternoon stretches on, the room cools slightly if clouds gather, or grows close if the wind drops. The smell of bodies joins the smell of fiber, not strongly, but honestly, wool, linen, skin, dust, and old leather warmed by effort. A sleeve is rolled and rolled again. A cap is pushed back. Someone clears his throat. The world inside the room is made of such small adjustments, each one barely visible, all of them keeping the work possible. You begin another bundle because the day has not yet released you. The first pass through the heckle is always a small beginning, even late in the afternoon, and the fiber's resistance calls the body back into its known shape. Pull evenly, lift cleanly, turn the bundle, clear the pins, save the toe, lay the line straight. We could make a list of these things, but the worker does not live them as a list. He lives them as a tide. The Daugava's trade may seem far from this bench, and yet every stroke of the heckle belongs to it. Hemp that leaves Riga may go outward into a world of ships, rope walks, warehouses, mills, farms, and naval stores. But before it is counted into that larger movement, it must pass this narrow gate of iron teeth. You are part of the port without standing on a quay. You are part of the river without getting wet. And when the afternoon light begins to lower, touching the window glass with a dull amber softness, we follow the Riga Hemp Heckler into the last working hours, where fatigue, habit, and quiet care move together toward evening. Evening does not arrive suddenly in the Riga Hemp Heckler's room, but gathers in small signs, first in the shadows under the bench, then in the cooler air near the door, then in the way everyone glances once more toward the window. The fiber is still pale in your hands, though the room around it has darkened. The pins of the heckle lose their sharp glint and become narrow black lines. We keep working, but the day has begun to lean homeward. The last hours require care because tired hands are more likely to waste what rested hands would save. You slow slightly, not enough to be idle, but enough to keep the fiber from breaking under a careless pull. The rhythm becomes almost tender. Hemp over iron, draw and lift, turn and draw, clear and smooth. The sound seems softer now, perhaps because the street outside has changed its own noise, with fewer loaded carts and more footsteps returning through the evening damp. A lamp may be lit if the work continues past good daylight. The flame gives the room a new smell, oily and warm, and it changes the color of everything it touches. Hemp becomes honeyed at the edges. Faces become older and gentler. The iron pins shine only when the hand moves near them. Shadows gather in the toe under the bench, and the floor seems deeper than before. In lamplight, the work feels older than the century. The Riga Hemp Heckler knows when to finish a batch and when not to begin another. This judgment may depend on the shop, the season, the orders waiting, and the person who expects the work done. But the body knows its own truth too. A bundle begun too late may be badly handled. A tool cleaned too hurriedly may be left with damp fiber in its teeth. We learn that ending well is part of the craft, not merely the absence of more work. Finished hanks are gathered and tied, perhaps with a twist of fiber itself, or a simple cord. And each one is laid with its fellows in a way that protects their straightness. You lift them carefully, because hours of work can be disturbed by one rough movement. The bundles make a dry, full sound as they settle together. They are lighter than they look, and heavier than they seem, because they carry the weight of the day's repeated motions. They carry your attention. The toe is not forgotten. It is swept, lifted, shaken, and sorted as well as time allows, because even the rough remains may be useful. The floor must be cleared of splinters and chaff. Not perfectly, because tomorrow will make more, but enough to keep the room from becoming careless. A broom whispers across the boards. Dust rises, then settles again on everything. You learn that cleaning a fiber room is less a victory than a truce. The heckles themselves are tended last. You pull trapped fibers from the pins, working slowly so the fingers do not meet the sharp points too directly. You inspect the block, the wedges, the bench. You cover or set aside what should not gather night damp. The tool has served through the day, and now it must be left ready for morning. There is a quiet companionship in this, the worker caring for the object that has shaped his labor. Outside, the air smells different when you open the door at evening. It carries river cold, chimney smoke, damp stone, and the faint food smells of households beginning their own night work. Riga's streets soften in the fading light, though the city is not asleep. Somewhere a wagon still moves. Somewhere a warehouse door closes with a hollow wooden note. Somewhere along the water, rope rubs against a post, and a moored vessel shifts with the current. Your clothes hold the day. Hemp dust clings to the front of the coat, settles in seams, hides in the fold of a cuff, and powders the boots. When you slap a sleeve lightly, pale dust lifts and vanishes in the dusk. Your hands smell of fiber even after wiping them. Under the nails, the day remains in thin lines. We do not make this unpleasant. We simply notice how work travels home with a person. The body feels the labor most clearly after stopping. While the motion continues, the arms obey. Once the bundle is set down and the bench is left behind, the wrists speak, the shoulders settle heavily, and the lower back announces its long patience. Walking home may ease it. Warm food may ease it. Sleep will ease it more than either, and tomorrow will ask again. The cycle is plain, but not empty. A hemp heckler in 1860s RIGA may pass many signs of the city on the way home, depending on where he lives and which workshop has held his day. He may pass warehouses, yards, narrow lanes, church walls, market remnants, puddles shining with lamplight, and doorways where people stand talking in low voices. The city is built from trades touching trades, and each trade leaves its smell in the evening air. Tar, bread, horse, smoke, fish, damp wool, hemp. At home, the hands are washed as well as they can be, though fiber dust is persistent and warm water may not be generous. A basin clouds quickly. Soap, if used, takes some smell and leaves some behind. You rub the fingers slowly, finding scratches you did not feel when the work was moving. The meal is simple, the chair is welcome. The quiet, after a day of rasping fiber, seems deeper because the body still hears the comb. There may be conversation, or there may be very little. A worker does not always come home with stories, especially when the day has been made of repetition rather than incident. Yet, Repetition is not the same as nothing happening. The bundle changed. The tools were kept. The wage was earned. The body endured. We can let that be enough, because many lives are held together not by great events, but by 1,000 completed tasks. Night lowers over the Daugava, and the river carries reflections in broken strips. The warehouses stand dark or half-lit. The lanes grow quieter. The workroom, now empty, keeps the smell of hemp in its boards and walls, as if the day was still breathing there. The heckles rest on the bench, their pins black in the dimness. Finished bundles wait in ordered lengths. Tow lies gathered in its place. And as the lamps burn lower across Riga, and the cold river keeps moving beyond the sleeping workrooms, we stay a little longer with the rested tools, the combed fibre, and the gentle knowledge that tomorrow's work is already waiting. The next morning is not a new story so much as a return, because the Riga Hemp Heckler's life is shaped by repetition, and repetition has a soft doorway of its own. You enter the workroom and find the bench where it was, the heckle where it was, the pale dust already waiting in the seams of the floor. The air is cold at first. It touches the face and hands before the stove has any strength. We step inside quietly, as if not to wake the tools too quickly. There is comfort in a room that remembers its purpose. The rough bundles wait near one wall. The sorted fibre rests apart. The broom leans in the corner. The window gives whatever light the weather permits. And in Riga that light may be grey, pearl, blue, or nearly silver when winter has tightened the morning. You take your place not as an actor entering a scene, but as a worker returning to a known rhythm. The day receives you without surprise. Before the first bundle is lifted, there is often a little preparation, small enough that no one outside the trade would think to mention it. The pins are checked, the bench is cleared, the hands are rubbed together for warmth. A coat may stay on until the room loosens. You look at the hemp already present and judge which batch should be handled first. This is not grand planning, but it matters, because the order of work can make a long day smoother or more troublesome. A good morning bundle helps the body find its pace. It should not be the worst fibre in the room if there is choice, because cold hands and stubborn hemp make poor companions. You choose something that will open steadily, and the first passes through the coarse heckle sound almost like the clearing of a throat. The workroom begins to speak again. We hear the scrape, the shift of boots, the breath of someone bending near the stove, and the small knock of wood against wood. This is how days accumulate into skill. Not through one lesson, not through one memorable triumph, but through morning after morning in which the hands meet material and learn another slight correction. The 1860s Riga Hemp Heckler may not think of himself as preserving knowledge, but he is. His wrists know the difference between force and firmness. His eyes know the difference between good length and false fullness. His fingers know when fibre is ready before words arrive. The world beyond the workshop may change more loudly than the bench does. Steam, railways, new factories, shifting markets, and official languages may all move around Riga in that century, but the heckle remains a simple tool with an old demand. Draw the fibre clean, save what can be saved, sort the long from the short. Leave the tool ready. We let that simplicity settle, not because the world is simple, but because a simple task can hold a person steady inside a changing world. The hemp comes from fields and waterways beyond sight, and the finished fibre may leave for places the worker never sees. This gives the job a peculiar mixture of closeness and distance. You know the material intimately, strand by strand, but you may never know the rope it becomes, the ship it serves, or the warehouse where it is finally used. We can feel a quiet humility in that. Many hands contribute to objects they will never recognize. When the first bundle of the new day begins to open, the old satisfaction returns in a small way. It is not excitement, it is more like a knot loosening in the mind. The long fibers show themselves, and the toe falls away, and the tool gives back evidence that your care has mattered. You lay the cleaned portion over your wrist for a moment, feeling its dry weight. It is warmer now from being handled. The sensory world of the work is exact, once you learn to enter it slowly. The hemp smell is grassy, sour, dusty, and faintly watery. The iron pins smell colder, especially in the first hour. The wooden bench smells of oil, old dust, and hands. The floor gives a dull creak under shifting weight. Outside, a cartwheel strikes a loose stone with a sound you recognize without looking. These are the day's familiar stars. A younger worker may ask a question, and the answer may be given with the fiber itself. Not like that. More gently. Turn it before you pull. Do not let the ends twist. Clean the pins before they clog. Such lessons are short because the work demonstrates them better than speech. You watch his first attempt, then his second, and you see the small improvement that makes teaching worthwhile. A trade continues through these small corrections. The Riga hemp heckler's hands are both rough and sensitive. This seems contradictory only from far away. Up close, it makes perfect sense. The skin thickens where it must, but the touch remains alert beneath it, able to feel dampness, brittleness, hidden shive, and uneven pull. Many old jobs made such hands, strong from use and delicate from necessity. We linger on that because it tells us something gentle about human work. Strength and care often live in the same fingers. As the morning builds again, the work takes on the same layered sound as the day before. But repetition does not mean sameness. The weather changes, the fiber changes. The body's mood changes. Someone's cough is better or worse. A bundle surprises you by opening cleanly. Another disappoints you. A shaft of light reaches the bench earlier than expected, or not at all. The day is familiar, yet not identical. And that difference keeps the worker awake enough, while still held by routine. There is a quiet moral education in such work, though the worker may never describe it that way. Hemp heckling teaches that roughness can be reduced, but not always erased. It teaches that patience saves length. It teaches that waste has causes, and that some causes began before the material reached your hands. It teaches that finishing well depends on all the earlier steps, including those done by people you may never meet. This is a humble lesson, and a useful one. By now, you may feel how the script of the day writes itself into the room. First the cold bench, then the coarse comb, then the finer comb, then sorting, tying, sweeping, eating, returning, finishing, and leaving. The order is not rigid every day, but it is recognizable enough to soothe the mind. We can rest inside that order. We can let the work carry us forward without asking too much. The hemp slides through the heckle again, and the pins separate what was tangled. A few fibers break. Many survive. Tow gathers. Line lengthens. The room breathes dust and light. Somewhere outside, Riga's river road keeps bearing goods toward the sea. But here the world is almost no wider than the span of your arms. This narrowing is not a loss tonight. It is a place to rest. And as another morning settles into another patient round of sorting, combing, smoothing, and laying aside, we stay with the Riga hemp heckler a little longer, following the work not toward drama, but toward the deep quiet of a life made steady by repeated care. By late morning, the work has entered that deeper pace where the hands seem to remember before the mind asks them to, and the Riga hemp heckler moves through each bundle with less thought and more trust. You feel the weight of the fiber change as it opens, first heavy with tangles, then lighter as the toe loosens and falls away. The coarse comb receives the roughness, the finer comb asks for patience, and between them the bundle becomes more willing. We stand close to the bench and hear the old rhythm returning, dry hemp across iron, breath through the nose, boots shifting quietly on dusty boards. The Daugava's dampness still finds the room, even when the stove has warmed the air, and the window glass holds a faint blur where cold outside meets heat within. You can smell wet wool near the doorway, old smoke in the rafters, and the sharper scent of newly opened fiber where the bundle has just been drawn clean. A gull cries somewhere beyond the warehouses, thin and distant, and then the sound is gone beneath the softer scrape of work. Riga is never far away, but in this hour it feels folded into the fibers themselves, carried in their smell, their dust, and their use. A hemp heckler learns to judge progress by small signs because the work rarely announces itself in large changes. The fiber begins to fall straighter over the wrist. The rough clumps grow fewer. The hand meets less resistance on each pass, and the bundle that once fought the pins now slides with a steadier, quieter answer. You do not need to say much about this change. because your fingers understand it. We can trust the fingers here with their scratches, their dry knuckles, and their plain knowledge. Somewhere near midday, a merchant's man may come in to ask how much has been finished, and his presence brings the outside world briefly into the workroom. He smells faintly of street damp, ink, and cold air, and his boots leave darker marks where mud has not yet dried. He looks at the hanks, lifts one lightly, and asks a question that belongs to weights and tallies rather than to wrists and shoulders. You answer if answer is needed, and then the room returns to its own slower measure, because hemp does not become cleaner by being counted. There is a quiet difference between being watched and being guided, and the Riga Hemp Heckler knows it without putting it into words. A foreman's glance can make the hands tighten, while a skilled older worker's glance can loosen them, because one eye measures output and the other sees method. You learn whose presence sharpens the air and whose presence settles it. We feel that distinction gently, as we feel many things in the workshop, not as conflict, but as part of the human weather through which work passes. The bundle now in your hand is long enough to reward care, and you bring it to the finer heckle with the softness of someone handling something that has already survived much. The pins receive it, and the fibers slide between them with a hiss like dry grass brushed by a sleeve. You draw, lift, turn, and draw again, letting the comb take the last stubborn fragments it can reach. The finished line hangs down in pale, uneven light, strong and modest at once, and for a moment the day feels almost orderly. When the sun reaches its high-veiled place, the work shifts again, not dramatically, but in the way a body shifts after many repeated motions, asking for rest without quite stopping. The Riga Hemp Heckler lays aside the bundle, clears the pins, and brushes fiber dust from the front of the coat. You notice the lines left by the bench against the palms. You notice a small ache between thumb and wrist. We notice, too, the ordinary mercy of pausing before the body has to demand it too loudly. The midday meal, if it comes now, is simple enough to be eaten without leaving the world of the workshop. Bread, perhaps a boiled potato wrapped in cloth, perhaps a little herring, perhaps only something warm from a pot if the day has been kind. The smell of food mixes with hemp, ash, oil, and damp wool, making a scent that would never belong to a dining room, but belongs completely here. You eat slowly because the work has trained your hands to be measured, and because hunger makes plain food generous. Someone near you may talk about weather upriver, and another may answer that good drying would help the next load, though no one can command either sun or rain. In the 1860s, Riga's hemp trade depends on fields, water, roads, hands, ships, and timing, and every person in the chain feels at least one of those uncertainties. Yet the talk stays mild. Workers often speak of large dependencies in small phrases because there is no use wrestling aloud with what cannot be moved by words. We hear this and let it remain modest. After eating, you may step briefly outside, and the air feels broad after the fiber room, cold on the face and carrying the river's plain breath. The lane has mud at the edges, flattened straw in the wheel ruts, and the dark shine of places where hooves have pressed water to the surface. A cart stands nearby with sacks or bales under cover, and the horse turns its head slowly, its harness creaking. You breathe once, carefully, and the lungs notice the difference between river air and room dust. Riga's buildings around you are practical in the way working districts often are, with worn doors, storage lofts, plaster that has seen many seasons, and windows clouded by use. Nothing asks to be admired, yet much is worth looking at. The patched wall, the iron latch polished by hands, the rope end stiff with tar near a post, the puddle reflecting a crooked strip of sky. We stand with you among these small things, and they make the place real enough to rest in. Then the workshop calls you back, not loudly but through habit, and the bench receives you as if no time had passed. The air inside feels thicker now after the street, and the smell of hemp returns with a fullness you had stopped noticing. You take up the next bundle and find the correct end, because beginning from the wrong place makes the first strokes troublesome. The pins wait without opinion. The work resumes. The afternoon begins with a steadier, heavier mood, as afternoons in old workrooms often do, when the body has accepted the day but not yet seen its end. The Riga Hemp Heckler does not chase speed now. He keeps the fiber moving and the waste reasonable, and he trusts that a careful rhythm will carry more work than a burst of force. You draw the bundle through the coarse teeth, feel it snag, ease it back slightly, and try again from a softer angle. The hemp yields because you have stopped insisting in the wrong way. This is one of the hidden lessons of the trade, and we can take it quietly, without turning it into a sermon. Some things open when met with patience rather than pressure. A knot in fiber, a problem in work, a tired thought in the mind, each may need a gentler pull and another angle. The heckle is iron, but the work is not hardness alone. It is firmness guided by touch. The floor under the bench has gathered the evidence of many hours. Short toe lies in pale wisps. Woody splinters scatter like little brown commas. Dust has settled along the cracks, and where a boot has moved often, the boards show a dull rubbed patch. You look down only briefly, because the fiber in your hand needs attention. But the sight tells the story of the day better than any ledger. Work leaves a weather behind it. The sorted hanks begin to form a more substantial pile, and their presence changes the room. In the morning, the task felt ahead of you, resting in rough bundles waiting to be opened. Now the finished work stands beside you, visible and touchable, a quiet proof against the ache in the arms. You may not smile at it, but something in the chest loosens. We know that feeling, the comfort of seeing effort take shape outside the body. The afternoon light passes through the window at a lower angle, striking dust in the air and making it drift like pale smoke. You see individual particles move slowly, rising on warm air, falling when the door opens, and catching again in the weak sun. The hemp itself seems brighter against the darker bench, and the iron pins throw narrow shadows across the wood. In this light, even rough work can look briefly delicate, as if the room has decided to show its patience. A younger worker nearby struggles with a tangled bundle, and for a while you hear the difference between his haste and the material's refusal. The fibers snap too often, the pins clog. His shoulders lift and his breath shortens. An older hand may take the bundle, not to shame him, but to show the slower way, drawing only a little at first, turning the mass, freeing one side before asking the other to follow. You watch, and the lesson enters the room without much speech. Such teaching is easy to miss from a distance, because no formal lesson announces itself. There is no slate, no chalk, no printed rule pinned to the wall. There is only a pair of hands demonstrating how to lose less fiber, and another pair trying to remember. We stay with this because the survival of many trades depended on such modest transmission, from wrist to wrist, glance to glance, correction to correction. The work outlived any single worker by passing through ordinary afternoons. The hemp heckler's clothing belongs to the job as much as the tools do. Sleeves must not hang too loose where pins can catch them. Aprons or work coats gather dust and protect little from the smell, but they spare the better clothes beneath. Boots need soles that can stand damp floors, muddy lanes, and long hours at the bench. Nothing about the clothing is decorative, yet every worn place tells where the body meets labor most often. By now, your fingers have lost some warmth despite the room's heat, because fine manipulation and dusty fiber dry the skin. You rub them together, then return to the bundle, feeling the roughness in the pads of the fingers as clearly as the fiber itself. A small crack near the nail stings when hemp slides across it. You adjust your grip. The day continues. This kind of endurance is made of minor adjustments, each one almost invisible, all of them necessary. The Riga Hemp Heckler also lives by light. In longer summer evenings, the work may stretch with the day, while in winter the lamp enters early and makes every shadow stronger. Natural light is kinder to judging color and cleanliness, but work does not always wait for kindness. When daylight fades, you bring the fiber nearer the lamp, turning it so hidden shive shows against the glow. The flame trembles when the door opens. The pins glitter for a moment, then darken again. We can imagine the sound of the lamp being trimmed, the small scrape and faint smell as the wick is adjusted. It is not a grand sound, but it belongs to the evening shift of the room. The air takes on the oily warmth of flame, and the walls seem to come closer, voices lower. The world outside becomes less visible and more audible, with footsteps, wheels, and distant bells arriving through the dim window rather than through sight. The last rough bundles of the day ask a question of fairness because tired workers still owe them care. It is tempting to leave the worst for tomorrow, and sometimes that is wise. It is tempting to rush the easiest through, and sometimes that breaks what would have been good. The Riga Hemp Heckler learns to balance the shop's need, the fiber's condition, and the body's remaining strength. We feel that balance in the slower movement of the hands. One bundle, damp at the core, resists the comb more than it should, and you stop before forcing it. The smell tells part of the story, deeper and sourer when the fibers are opened. It may need drying, airing, or simply separation from better material. A careless worker might tear through it and count the result, but the better answer is to mark its difference and spare the long fiber from needless damage. Good judgment often looks like delay. As evening comes nearer, the finished hanks are handled with a quieter care, because the room is tired and one clumsy motion could disturb the order made through hours. You lift them, align them, and place them where they will be counted or moved. Their texture is dry, strong, faintly springy, and a little harsh against the skin. They smell of the whole day. They smell of fields, water, dust, iron, and Riga's working air. The tow pile has grown, and it too must be gathered. Short fibers catch on one another, making a loose cloud that compresses under the hand. It may go elsewhere for rough spinning, stuffing, corking, or other lowly purposes, and though it is less valued, it is not nothing. You gather it because the workshop does not honor waste. We can rest in that thought, the old habit of finding use even in what falls away. There are moments in such a day when the mind becomes very quiet. Not empty, exactly, but untroubled by the need to name everything. The hands know, the bench holds, the fiber passes, and the city beyond the wall continues in its own broad current. You do not need to be elsewhere. For this minute, the work is enough, and the enoughness is gentle. The bell for the evening may be heard faintly, or the end may come simply because the light and the day's measure have reached their limit. In the Riga hemp room, endings are practical. You finish the pass you are making. You do not leave fiber caught badly in the pins. You tie what should be tied, cover what should be protected, and brush the bench clear enough for morning. The work ends by becoming ready to begin again. The broom's sound changes the room more than one might expect. All day, the floor has received what the hands removed, and now the floor gives it back in soft scraping lines. Dust rises around your boots. The smell grows stronger for a few breaths. Tow, chips, straw, mud, and crumbs of the day are gathered into a rough order. We watch the ordinary dignity of cleaning, because no workshop stays trustworthy if endings are careless. The heckle is cleared last, or nearly last, and you lift fibers from between the pins with a patience that feels different from production. This is care without visible output, the care that keeps tomorrow possible. Each pin stands straight or needs attention. Each trapped wisp is loosened. The wooden block is wiped where hands and fiber have left dust. You may not think of the tool as a companion, but you treat it almost as one. When the door opens for leaving, the outside air enters like a cool cloth laid across the face. The room behind you remains warm and dusty, holding the day in its walls, while the lane outside smells of wet stone, smoke, and the river's evening breath. You step out carrying fiber in your clothing and fatigue in your shoulders. The city receives you without ceremony. Riga has many workers returning at this hour, each marked by a different trade. Along the way, you might pass a rope walk, a warehouse yard, or a cart piled with goods covered against weather, and each sight reminds you that your own work is only one step in a larger chain. Rope makers will twist fibers into strength. Sailors will truss lines they did not comb. Packers will tie bales with cord that began as a plant in someone else's field. We do not need to follow every strand to its ending. It is enough to know the strands go on. The evening streets are softer now, though not silent. Hooves strike stone more slowly. A child calls from a doorway. A woman lifts water with careful arms. Smoke from cooking fires settles low where the air is damp. You walk through these sounds with the tired steadiness of someone who has earned a chair, a meal, and perhaps a few minutes without needing the hands for anything difficult. The day has narrowed, then widened again. At home, if home is a small room with shared walls and a stove that must be coaxed, the world of the workshop does not vanish immediately. Hemp dust shakes from the coat. A basin clouds under the hands. The smell remains in the cuffs and hair. You eat, and the fingers sometimes repeat the day's motion unconsciously. Thumb rubbing against forefinger, as if testing fiber that is no longer there. We know how work lingers after work ends. Sleep comes differently to a body shaped by repetitive labor. It may come quickly, from heaviness alone, or it may come slowly, with the arms still remembering the pull and lift of the day. The mind may replay the bench, the pins, the rough bundle that resisted, the good bundle that opened cleanly. These are not sharp thoughts. They pass like carts far down a street, heard briefly, then lost. The body sinks beneath them. And as night settles over 1860s Riga, with the river dark beyond the warehouses and the hemp room resting behind its closed door, we let the day's rhythm continue softly in memory. The tools are still, the fibers lie in order, the tow is gathered, the bench waits in the dark. Somewhere beyond the city, fields will grow another season's hemp. Water will soften stalks, brakes will crack woody stems, and other hands will send rough fiber onward. But for now, there is only the quiet after work, and you are allowed to rest inside it. Morning will come again with grey light, cold boards, and the smell of fiber waking under the first touch of the hand. The Riga Hemp Heckler will return to the bench, and we will return with him, not because the task has changed, but because the task has depth enough to be entered many times. Each day offers the same humble invitation. Bring order to what is tangled. Save what can be saved. Leave the tool ready. Let the work move slowly through the hands. Before the first bundle is lifted, there is that breath of stillness when the room belongs to no motion yet. The iron pins wait. The wood holds yesterday's warmth only in memory, and the window gives a muted square of light onto the bench. You stand there with hands not yet dusty, listening to the city stir beyond the walls. We are back where the work begins, and there is comfort in the return. The bundle chosen for the morning has a clean outer look, but the heckler never trusts appearance alone. You open it with the fingers, loosening the twist, shaking it lightly, watching for hidden chips and darker dampness. The smell is mild enough, grassy and dry at the edges, with only a faint sour depth where the stalks once lay in water. You test the length, you feel the pull. The day begins not with force, but with attention. The first pass through the coarse heckle is almost ceremonial, though no one names it so. Hemp meets iron, the pins catch, and your arm draws back with a slow firmness that wakes the whole line of muscle from hand to shoulder. The sound is rough, then smoother on the second pass. A little toe falls, a small sliver of woody stem drops to the bench and lies there like a thin brown needle. We notice it, then continue. A worker who has done this for years may seem quiet, because the work has taken the place of many unnecessary words. He does not need to explain every adjustment. He shifts the bundle half a hand's breadth, changes the angle, loosens the grip, and gets a cleaner draw. These small decisions are the grammar of the trade. You can read them only by staying near enough, long enough, and humbly enough. By the second hour, the room has warmed, and the morning's first stiffness has left your fingers. The fiber passes more easily now, not only because the hemp has opened, but because the body has entered the old channel. Breath and motion begin to keep company, the shoulders lower, the wrist finds its circle, the eyes look without staring. We are watching labor become rhythm again, and rhythm become a place where the mind may settle. The work is physical, but it is not blind. Every pass has a purpose, and every purpose is guided by what the material shows. If the fiber tangles near the end, you tease it apart before drawing again. If short pieces gather too thickly, you clear them before they clog the teeth. If the long line begins to thin too much, you stop before the value is lost. The Riga Hemp Heckler is always balancing cleanliness against preservation. That balance matters because hemp's strength lies in its length. The long fibers can become strong thread, cordage, canvas, or other goods that depend on continuity, while broken fibers move into rougher uses. A careless pull turns value into waste. A patient hand keeps more of the plant's strength intact. We let that thought move slowly because it is true of more than hemp, though hemp is enough for us tonight. Outside, the Daugava district continues in practical layers. A cart backs toward a warehouse door. Men call directions in low, clipped voices. A barrel rolls briefly, then stops with a dull wooden thud. The air carries tar, mud, horse sweat, smoke, and river damp through every opening. You hear these sounds without leaving the bench, and they remind you that the quiet workroom is not isolated, only sheltered from the wider press of trade. The hemp in your hand has been grown, harvested, retted, dried, broken, and scutched before reaching this hour. And each earlier stage has left a trace. Over-retting makes weakness. Under-retting leaves stubborn gum. Poor drying invites mustiness. Hard breaking can shorten the fiber before the heckler ever sees it. You learn to read these histories without knowing the people who made them. The bundle is a record, and the hand is its patient reader. A faint ache returns near the base of the thumb, as expected, and you adjust before it becomes too loud. You change the hand's position, widen your stance, and let the next pull come more from the shoulder than the wrist. These small mercies to the body are part of lasting in the job. No one may praise them, no one may notice them. But without them, the day would grow sharper than it needs to be. The younger worker has improved since yesterday, and his bundle breaks less often now. You hear fewer snapped fibers, fewer irritated breaths, and more of the clean, sliding sound that means he is learning to let the heckle work. He glances toward the older hands less often. His shoulders still rise when the hemp catches, but not as high. We can feel the quiet pleasure of progress that does not need announcement. By late morning, several hanks lie finished, and their pale lengths make a soft contrast with the darker bench. They are not uniform in the modern sense, yet they share a direction, a combed agreement that was absent when the day began. You pass a hand over them gently, not pressing, just checking the lie of the fibers. The surface is dry and a little harsh, but beneath the roughness, there is order. That is the gift of the heckle. The workroom's air is now fully itself, warm near the stove, cooler near the floor, dusty in the sun, and never quite free of the river. You swallow and taste fiber faintly. You wipe the corner of the mouth with the back of the hand, then think better of it, and use the cloth. The cloth smells of hemp, too. Everything does, after a while. We do not resist this. We simply belong to the room for the length of the day. When the noon hour approaches again, the Riga hemp heckler feels the day become broader, as if the work has stretched far enough to show its shape. The rough bundles waiting in the corner no longer seem endless, though they are still enough to fill the afternoon with slow effort. You count without counting, judging the day by piles and spaces, by finished hanks laid straight in rough fiber still bound. We let the room measure time for us through dust, light, and the steady use of hands. The meal pause arrives with the same plain grace as before, and this sameness is part of its comfort. Bread is taken out, a knife opens a piece of cheese or cuts a little onion. Someone pours from a tin vessel, and the sound of liquid against metal is briefly clearer than the rasp of hemp. You sit where you can, perhaps with your back to the wall and your boots stretched toward the warmer boards, and for a moment your hands rest open on your knees. The fingers look older at midday than they did in the morning. Hemp dust has settled into their creases, and the small scratches near the nails have darkened slightly with work. You rub one thumb slowly over the other, feeling rough skin, dryness, and the tender places where fiber has passed too often. There is no complaint in this noticing. The body is simply reading its own ledger, written in pressure, dust, and the slow expense of effort. Talk turns to ordinary matters, which are the matters that hold a life in place. Someone mentions a roof needing repair before the next hard rain. Someone has heard that a load from upriver came in poorer than promised. Someone else says a neighbor's son has gone to work near the harbor, where the hours may be longer, but the wage steadier. The conversation moves without hurry, because the food is simple and the day still has more work than talk. In Riga, such talk would have carried more than one tongue, depending on the room and the people gathered there. German might shape a merchant's order, Russian an official notice, Latvian a household memory, and other languages might pass through with sailors, clerks, or seasonal laborers. You need not understand every word to understand the room's human meaning. Work makes its own translations through gestures, shared fatigue, and the quick glance that asks for a tool without speech. After the meal, the return to the bench is always slightly heavier. The body has tasted stillness, and stillness has reminded it of weight. You rise, brush crumbs from your lap, shake dust from the cloth, and take up the next bundle with a quiet inward agreement. The hemp is no kinder after food, but you may be. You may start more slowly, letting the first few passes rebuild the rhythm instead of demanding it all at once. The first afternoon bundle is often the one that tells whether the rest of the day will go smoothly. If it opens well, the hands regain confidence. If it catches and breaks, the mind must resist irritation before irritation becomes waste. Today it catches near the middle, where a twist has been hidden inside the bound stalks, and the pins hold fast enough that forcing would shorten good fiber. You ease it back, loosen the twist, and begin again from the side. This patient correction is almost invisible, but it is the kind of moment on which the quality of the work depends. A hurried observer would see only a pause. A skilled heckler sees judgment. You have not stopped because you are tired, though you are tired. You have stopped because the fiber has asked to be approached differently. We can rest with that image, the tired hand still listening carefully. The finer heckle waits until the roughness has been reduced, and when at last the bundle is ready, you bring it across with more delicacy than the morning required. The pins stand close, and their shadows fall like dark comb marks across the bench. Hemp passes over them in long pale strands, catching, releasing, catching again, until the last clinging fragments are drawn away. The sound is quieter here, less rasp than whisper, and it soothes even as it wears the wrist. In the low afternoon, smells deepen. The stove has burned long enough that ash and warm iron lie under everything. Damp wool near the door gives off its sour comfort. The fiber itself seems drier and sharper, especially when shaken against the light. Outside, some cart has lost straw into the lane, and the smell of trampled straw comes in when the door opens. Riga's working air arrives in pieces, each one carrying a trade, a weather, or a passing body. The younger worker sweeps near the wall, not because the day is ending yet, but because tow and chips have spread too far from the benches. His broom makes small half circles, careful not to stir more dust than necessary, though dust rises anyway. You watch the pale wisps gather, then break apart, then gather again. The floor of a hemp room is never fully conquered. It is only brought back again and again to a state that allows work to continue. A finished hank is lifted for inspection, and in this act the work becomes almost quiet enough to hear the breathing around you. You hold the fiber near the window, turn it slowly, and let the weak daylight find the darker pieces. A small woody chip shows itself, and you draw it out with 2 fingers. A knot follows. Then the hank falls cleanly again. It is not perfect, but it is honest, and honest is often the true standard of a working day. The Riga hemp heckler may not own the fiber he handles, may not choose where it goes, and may not receive much more than a wage for his care. Yet the intimate contact between hand and material gives a certain kind of belonging, not ownership, but acquaintance. You know this hank in a way no distant buyer can know it. You know where it resisted, where it opened, where it nearly broke. Such knowledge is small, but it is real. As the afternoon proceeds, the body begins choosing economy over display. The swing of the arm shortens slightly. The stance becomes more rooted. You keep the bundle closer to the bench, saving lift where lift is not needed. A man new to the work might mistake this for weariness alone, but we can see the skill inside it. The experienced body is not lazy. It is careful with its remaining strength. There is also a sound that comes from finished fiber being laid with finished fiber, a dry settling sigh that marks progress without words. Each hank joins the others and changes the pile's shape. The rough corner empties by small degrees, the finished side grows. This movement from disorder to order is one of the reasons the work can calm the mind, even when the body tires. You can see what has been done, and that sight steadies you. A small draft moves under the door, carrying chill along the floor before it reaches your ankles. In Riga, weather rarely seems fully outside. It enters through cracks, sleeves, boots, and breath, and it settles wherever workers least need it. You shift one foot and feel grit under the sole. The boards are dusty, but beneath the dust there is old damp, the memory of river air and winter mornings. Every surface has absorbed its share of seasons. The hemp itself carries seasons too. Some stalks speak of a better growing year, with longer fibers and more even strength. Some tell of difficulty, too much rain, poor drying, harsh handling, or delays that left their mark. The heckler reads these signs without turning them into story, because work requires response more than speculation. Still, we may imagine fields beyond Riga, pale with stalks, cut and retted, then sent toward the city through hands that also grew tired. Now and then a bundle has been tied too tightly, and when you loosen it, the fibers spring unevenly, holding the memory of compression. You shake it gently, not as one shakes dust from a rug, but as one wakes something stiff from sleep. The mass opens little by little. You separate a portion and leave the rest covered, so the bench does not become confused with too many stages of work. Order begins before the comb. Order begins in how you lay things down. The workroom's plain organization might seem unremarkable, yet it keeps the mind from fraying. Rough fiber here, coarse combed fiber there, fine line away from the floor, tow gathered before it spreads. Tools return to their places. Water kept out of the dust if possible. In these habits, the room becomes a kind of memory shared by everyone who works inside it. You do not need to ask where everything belongs, because the day has told you many times. The afternoon's fatigue can make small sounds more tender. The creak of a bench becomes familiar as a voice. The brush of hemp against your sleeve seems softer. Even the iron pins, severe in the morning, now feel like old instruments being asked to play the same low note again and again. We listen to the room that way for a little while, and the work becomes less a task than a steady surrounding. A man passing the door laughs in the lane, and the laugh seems too bright for the dusty room, but it fades quickly into cart noise and river wind. You do not follow it. The bundle in your hands has reached the point where one final pass will either clean it or harm it. You choose carefully. The hemp slides through, catches once, releases, and falls straighter. The decision was small, but the result is visible. You lay it aside. If there is a ledger nearby, it belongs to another kind of order. Weight, grade, owner, delivery, payment. All written in ink that dries without smelling of fiber. The ledger has its truth, and the hands have theirs. A proper trade needs both, yet the two truths do not feel the same. Ink records the finished measure, while your body remembers the resistance of each bundle, the dust in the throat, the ache under the shoulder blade. We hold both truths gently, without making either one the whole story. The light begins to lower earlier than expected, perhaps because clouds have gathered over the Daugava. The window turns grey, and the fiber loses some of its pale brightness. Someone reaches for the lamp, though not yet lighting it, as if preparing the room for evening before evening fully arrives. This small anticipation changes the mood. The day's end is not here, but it has entered the room as a possibility. You continue with the bundle already begun because half-finished fiber left overnight can tangle, gather damp, or simply trouble the morning's order. The combing now is slower, as the eyes work harder in reduced light. You bring the hemp closer to the window, then closer to the bench, then hold it where the remaining daylight still finds the line of the strands. The room narrows. The hands become more deliberate. We feel the day's last careful stretch beginning. When the lamp is finally lit, it does not banish dusk so much as make a small golden island within it. The flame smells of oil and warmed metal. Shadows deepen behind the pins. The hemp glows near the lamp, but beyond the bench the room grows less distinct, with corners softening into brown and grey. Faces become more inward in lamplight, and voices fall almost without decision. Evening asks everyone to become quieter. The Riga Hemp Heckler's last work by lamp is usually not the roughest, if good sense can arrange it. Fine inspection, tying, clearing, and finishing suit the narrowed light better than opening the most stubborn batch. You take the hanks one by one, straighten their ends, and tie them so they hold without being crushed. The fibers make a dry music under the fingers. A loose strand catches on the cracked skin near your thumb, and you free it slowly. There is peace in putting things in order at the end of a day, even when the day has been hard. A tied bundle is a sentence completed. A cleared heckle is a morning made easier for the person you will be tomorrow. A swept floor is not cleanliness forever, but it is respect for the next beginning. We let those thoughts pass softly through the workroom because they are enough. The old jobs often knew how to end by preparing the return. The tow pile is compressed and moved aside, its loose fibers catching lamplight along their edges. It looks almost soft, though your fingers know it's scratch and dust. Some of it clings to the broom, some clings to your trousers, some refuses to leave the crack between two boards. You bend, gather, lift, and accept that the room will keep a little of everything, because workshops are never emptied completely of their work. The door opens once, and a ribbon of colder air crosses the room, making the lamp tremble. Outside, the lane is now dim, with wet stones showing small reflections of sky and window light. The smell of supper fires has begun to mix with river damp, and somewhere a horse stamps in its harness. You hear the city turning toward night in its practical way. No one announces it. The signs are everywhere. The final clearing of the heckle requires the same attention as the first combing, though the reward is less visible. You take fiber from between pins, pull it upward, twist it loose, and set it with the rest. The iron points are sharp enough to remind you when your attention slips. They prick without malice. They simply remain themselves. A tool does not grow gentler at day's end, so the hand must remain awake a little longer. At last, the bench is mostly clear. Finished, hanks rest where they should. Rough bundles wait under cover or against the wall. Tow is gathered. The broom has done what it can. The air is still dusty, but the dust now settles rather than rises, and the lamp burns with the small, patient steadiness of a tired room. You stand for a moment with nothing in your hands, and that emptiness feels strange after hours of fiber. The body, released from repetition, begins to speak in fuller sentences of its own. The wrist aches. The shoulders are heavy. The soles of the feet feel the boards even after you shift your weight. Your throat asks for water. Your back asks to bend the other way. We listen without alarm, because this is the body accounting for honest labor, and because rest is already approaching through the doorway. Leaving the workroom is not an escape from the job, not completely. It is more like stepping out of one layer of the day into another. Your clothes still hold hemp. Your hands still smell of it. Your mind still hears the comb, especially in the first few minutes after the sound has stopped. Outside, Riga's evening air takes you in, cool, damp, smoky, and full of other people's endings. The city is a great collection of tools being put down. Along the riverwood streets, warehouses stand with their doors closed or half closed, and the last movement of goods sounds slower than it did at noon. Chains settle. Wheels grind through mud. A man calls to another from a loading place, and his voice travels oddly in the damp air. The Daugava reflects what little light remains, broken by current, boats, and the dark shapes of moored craft. You walk beside this working water without needing to name every vessel. If you pass near a rope walk, the thought of your day may extend into another craft. There, fibers like the ones you combed may be twisted into yarns, yarns into strands, and strands into rope, each turn adding strength through patient joining. The Hemp Heckler's work is not the final form, but it makes the final form possible. We can feel the modest satisfaction of that connection, the way one quiet job supports another, often without meeting it face to face. At home, the sound changes first. The workshop's rasp is gone, and in its place come quieter domestic noises, a pot lid, a chair leg, water poured into a basin, fabric shaken near the stove. The room may be small, and the light may be low, but it is not the bench. You remove the outer coat carefully, so dust does not spread more than it must. Still, hemp follows. It is a faithful dust. Washing the hands takes time, because the day has settled into the skin. Warm water loosens some of it. Soap takes more. The scratches sting briefly, then dull. You rub the nails with care, and the basin clouds with pale fibers, grey water, and the faint smell of iron and plant. The hands that emerge are cleaner but not untouched. Work has a way of remaining even after washing, in roughness, strength, and memory. The evening meal tastes stronger after a day in dust. Soup, bread, cabbage, potato, fish, or whatever the household can provide, comes forward with more kindness than it might have at midday. You eat with the slower appetite of someone whose body has earned food through repetition. Conversation may move around you. You answer when needed. Sometimes you simply sit, letting warmth return to the fingers, and quiet gather round the shoulders. Sleep does not have to be dramatic to be merciful. It may begin with the head leaning slightly, with the mind still arranging hanks and clearing pins, with the rhythm of draw and lift passing once more behind the eyes. The body is not yet dreaming, but it has loosened its hold on the day. We rest there for a while, in that borderland where work becomes memory, and memory becomes a soft, repeating motion. In the darkened workroom, the tools remain exactly where they were left. The heckles' iron pins cool through the night. The bench holds pale dust in its cracks. Finished bundles lie with their fibers aligned, waiting for hands that will carry them onward. The room has no need to speak. It has been given order enough for now. Outside, Riga's river moves through the darkness, broader than the lane, older than the warehouses, and patient beyond all daily labor. Another day will come, and it will not ask for novelty. It will ask for the same care given again, the same bench approached, the same pins cleared, the same fiber judged by touch and light. The Riga Hemp Heckler will return with hands that remember both soreness and skill. You can almost feel that future morning already, cold at the window, grey at the floorboards, and full of rough bundles waiting to be opened into line. Before that morning arrives, there is rest, and rest has its own quiet craft. The coat hangs where dust can fall from it. The basin is emptied. The lamp at home burns low. The city outside softens by degrees, each cart farther away, each footstep less distinct, each sound losing its edge in damp night air. You are no longer pulling hemp through iron teeth, but the slow rhythm remains, gentled now into breath. The work of the Hemp Heckler is not a famous work, not the kind remembered with statues, painted banners, or stories told loudly across generations. Yet it belongs to the foundation of many things, to ropes held in weather, bales tied for travel, cloth made for use, and trades linked quietly from field to port. We stay with it because it shows how ordinary hands help large worlds move. It shows how patience can be practical. And in the deepest part of night, when Riga's lanes are dark and the Daugava carries only faint reflections, the hemp room rests like a closed hand. The tools are where they belong. The fibers are laid straight. The dust has settled. Tomorrow will lift it again, but not yet. For now, there is only the calm after repeated work, the bench waiting in the dark, and the quiet certainty that nothing more is required until morning. Before the city fully wakes, the workroom takes on the color of old pewter, and the window slowly separates itself from the wall. You enter with the chill still on your coat, carrying the outside air in folds of wool and along the edges of your boots. The floorboards answer underfoot with a low creak, and the sound seems larger than it will later because the room has not yet filled with scraping fiber, shifting bodies, and the warm dust of the day. We pause there, just inside the door, where the familiar smell of hemp waits like something half asleep. The stove is coaxed rather than commanded, because fire in a damp Riga morning has its own slow temper. A little kindling catches, then hesitates, then begins to speak in faint clicks and sighs beneath the iron. Smoke draws upward, not perfectly at first, and the air carries a brief, bitter edge before the chimney accepts its work. You warm your hands near the stove only long enough to bring feeling back to the fingertips. The hemp is waiting, and so is the bench. The first bundle has stiffened in the night air, and you loosen it with care, feeling how the fibers hold together more tightly before the room warms. The outer strands are dry and cold, while the inner part keeps a faint heaviness, not wet enough to trouble the whole batch, but enough to ask for a slower beginning. You shake it gently, and a few chips of woody stem fall onto the bench with tiny taps. We watch them settle, small reminders that even prepared fiber still carries the plant's old skeleton. The coarse heckle stands ready, its iron teeth fixed in the wooden block with a patience that feels almost severe. You lay the hemp across the pins, draw it toward you, and the first pull gives a thick rasp, fuller than yesterday's last evening sound. Morning always begins with a little roughness. The body is waking, the tool is cold, the fiber has not yet learned the day's rhythm. Still, by the third pass, the motion has softened, and the bundle begins to open like something remembering how to yield. Outside, the lane gathers its first traffic, and the noises arrive through the walls in muted layers. A cartwheel catches in a rut, a driver murmurs to a horse, and someone closes a door too firmly in a nearby yard. The Daugava is not visible from every workroom, but its presence is felt in the damp, in the trade, and in the way the whole district seems to breathe toward the river. Riga wakes by labor, not by spectacle, and the Hemp Heckler wakes with it. As the first hour settles, your hands grow dusted pale across the knuckles, and the wrinkles of the skin fill with the color of dry fiber. You turn the bundle and draw it through again, saving the long strands, letting the short ones go where they must. Tow gathers below, soft-looking and scratchy to the touch. A light waste that is not entirely waste. We keep returning to that, because in this trade, even what falls away may still find some humble use. The room fills slowly with other workers, or with the fuller presence of those already there, and each person brings a different small weather. A coat smells of rain. A cap smells of smoke. Someone has carried bread wrapped in cloth, and for a moment the warm sour scent escapes before being tucked away. There are greetings, but not many, and most of them are shaped by habit rather than ceremony. The work does not require brightness. It requires steadiness. The Riga Hemp Heckler's bench becomes a little world by mid-morning, with rough material on one side, opened fiber in the middle, and finished line placed carefully away from feet. The arrangement is simple, but it is the simplicity of long use, the kind that keeps a tired person from making unnecessary mistakes. You know where to reach without looking. You know where not to set a drink. You know which corner of the bench catches loose fibers and must be swept more often. Such knowledge is modest, but it saves the day from friction. A better bundle comes next, and you feel the difference immediately. The fibers are longer, more even, and less crowded with shive, and the comb receives them with a cleaner sound. You do not rush it, because good material deserves the same patience as poor material, perhaps more, since careless force can turn a fine thing ordinary. The strands draw out pale and strong, falling over your wrist in a long rough sheet. You lift them toward the light, and they carry a dull, natural shine. There is beauty here, though no one in the room stops to name it. The hemp is not soft like flax prepared for fine linen, and it does not pretend toward gentility, yet its strength has a plain grace when combed straight. It hangs with purpose. It remembers rain, field, hand, river, and tool. We stand close enough to see the little irregularities, the darker strands, the pale ones, the slight roughness that will matter later when the fiber is spun or twisted. Beauty in a workroom often looks like readiness. By the time the sun has lifted behind cloud, the stove has warmed the wall nearest it, though the far corner remains cool and the floor stays stubbornly chill. Your feet know the difference between boards near the stove and boards near the door. Your shoulders know when the draft passes. Your nose knows when a fresh batch is opened, because the scent changes at once. Greener, drier, or more sour depending on its history. The senses become tools, and the tools become part of the body's wider sense. A clerk may enter with a paper folded in his hand, and his presence briefly straightens the room's attention. He asks after a quantity, names a merchant or a warehouse, and speaks as if the work were already a number waiting to be written. You glance at the finished hanks, not with resentment, but with the practical knowledge that numbers are always later than hands. The fiber must pass through iron first. The wrist must do its quiet work before ink can claim the result. When he leaves, the door lets in a ribbon of colder air, and the lamp flame, if one is still burning in the dim morning, bends toward the room. The smell of the street comes with it. Mud, wet leather, horses, and the faint river smell that belongs to Riga's working quarters. Then the door closes, and the room returns to hemp. We return with it because the task has not lost its place. The bundle in your hand is still half done. The finer heckle asks for another kind of listening. With the coarser tool, resistance is expected, even welcomed as part of opening the fiber, but the finer pins reveal mistakes more sharply. If the hemp is not ready, it catches in a way that shortens the line and fills the teeth too quickly. You bring the prepared fibers down lightly, draw them through, lift, turn, and bring them down again. The sound is a finer whisper now, like dry reeds brushed together in a low wind. A little static seems to live in the fiber on dry days, though no one may call it that in the room. Strands cling to your sleeve, to the bench edge, to one another, and you smooth them with the side of the hand. Dust rises around them in a pale veil. You blink it away. The body accepts many small discomforts without turning them into events, and in that acceptance there is both endurance and fatigue. We notice both, because warm realism has room for each. Near the window, the younger worker is learning to tie hanks more neatly, and his first attempts are too tight. The older hand loosens one with a patient tug, showing that fiber tied too hard loses its clean lay, while fiber tied too loosely becomes troublesome to move. The lesson is small, but exact. You can hear the difference when the bundle is lifted, whether it settles as one body or shifts inside its own tie. Work teaches through such details. The morning continues in passes and pauses, and the world outside seems to move from grey to a softer, busier colour. Voices in the lane become more frequent. A dog shakes water from its coat somewhere near the door. A cartman laughs once, then coughs. The workshop absorbs these sounds without answering them. Inside, the hemp keeps passing through the comb, and the hands keep turning roughness toward order. By now, the first ache has entered the shoulders, but it is still a manageable ache, almost companionable. You know where it lives, and you know how to shift so it does not sharpen. The bundle is brought closer. The stance changes. The next pull comes from a steadier part of the arm. We stand beside you in that small adjustment, because such adjustments are the hidden architecture of a working life, holding up the day without being noticed. Midday approaches, with a soft thickening of air. The room is warmer, the dust more visible, and the smell of hemp deeper from so much opened fiber. A finished pile has grown enough to change the feeling of the bench, giving the morning a visible answer. The rough side has lessened. The straightened side has gained. This is not triumph, but it is something like reassurance. A plain sign that repeated motions have not disappeared into nothing. When you pause to eat, the hands take a moment to understand that they are allowed to stop. They remain shaped as if holding fiber, fingers slightly curved, palms dry and pale with dust. You brush them against a cloth, then against each other, and still the smell remains. The bread tastes of caraway, perhaps, or rye, dense and dark against the tongue. The first bite is quiet. The second seems to bring the body back from the narrow place of work. Around you, the room softens into midday talk. Someone speaks of prices. Someone asks whether the river ice, in colder months, will come early or late. Someone mentions family, not at length, but enough to let the home world enter the workroom for a minute. The Riga Hemp Heckler listens while eating, and you listen too, not needing every detail. The voices are part of rest, rising and falling around the benches like a low domestic fire. The meal ends when it ends, without ceremony, because the afternoon does not wait outside the door until invited. You fold the cloth, set aside the cup, and rise with the particular heaviness that comes from stopping just long enough to feel tired. The bench is there. The fiber is there. Your hands return to their old positions, and after a few slower passes, the body finds the channel again. This return may be the truest motion of the day. Afternoon work begins with inspection, because the morning hanks must be worthy of being tied and counted. You lift each one toward the window, finding dark fragments, matted patches, or stubborn bits of broken stem. Some flaws can be removed with the fingers. Some require another light pass through the comb. Some must simply be accepted into a lower grade, because no hand can make all fiber equal. We let that acceptance be gentle, not defeated, only accurate. In a port city, grading matters because distance magnifies small differences. A bundle sent out poorly cleaned may disappoint someone far away. In a rope walk, a sail loft, a warehouse, or a yard where strength is not theoretical. The Riga Hemp Heckler may never see that later complaint or later satisfaction, but his work travels into it. This is the quiet responsibility of trades that feed other trades. The hand at the bench touches futures it will not visit. The afternoon batch is mixed, and mixed fiber teaches patience in layers. One handful opens quickly, while the next holds knots along the middle. One smells clean, while another has the duller odor of damp storage. You keep them separate when needed, and you resist the lazy wish to treat them as one. The work is slower this way, but truer. We learn again that care often means noticing difference when tiredness would prefer sameness. The light through the window shifts, and with it the fibers show new colors: grey, straw, flaxen, and sometimes a faint green-brown shadow near the thicker places. You hold the hank at an angle, and the unevenness reveals itself more clearly. Your thumb and forefinger move along the strand, testing. The texture is rough, dry, and resilient. It does not flatter the skin, yet it does not crumble either. Good hemp has a plain, stubborn life in it. A small interruption comes when the coarse heckle clogs more deeply than usual. Broken fibers are packed near the base of the pins, and each new pass drags against the old waste. You stop and clear it, pin by pin, lifting the trapped toe with a pick, and then with your fingers when the pick cannot reach. The work is fiddly and slightly irritating, but irritation would only make the hand careless. You breathe, clear, and return. The tool feels better immediately, which is one of the satisfactions of maintenance. A cleaned heckle answers with a cleaner draw. The bundle moves more smoothly, the pins do their proper sorting, and the sound loses its thick, troubled edge. You can feel the difference up the arm. We stay with that feeling because it is a simple reminder that tending the means is part of reaching the end. The tool's condition is never separate from the worker's labor. Outside, the afternoon has turned damp again, and the first small marks of rain appear on coats coming through the door. The air smells of wet stone and river mud, and the lane darkens even before evening. Rain changes the workshop's mood, making the interior feel both more enclosed and more necessary. The stove becomes more valuable, the window less generous. The hemp must be watched for damp, because moisture can alter the feel of everything. You adjust where the finished hanks rest, moving them away from the draft and any place where wet coats might brush them. Such caution is ordinary, but it carries the whole day's value. Fiber that has been patiently cleaned should not be carelessly exposed. You place a covering where needed, shift a pile, and make the bench's order fit the weather. The Riga Hemp Heckler works not only with fiber and tool, but with air, light, and season. The rain itself becomes part of the afternoon sound. It taps on the window, runs from the roof, and softens the cart noise outside into a dull, rolling murmur. Inside, the scrape of hemp seems closer, more intimate against the wet hush beyond the walls. You may feel drowsiness press at the edges of attention. Not sleep, exactly, but the heavy calm that can come from repeated motion and rain. The pins keep you present. The fiber keeps you honest. As the rain continues, more dust settles instead of floating, and the air feels heavier on the lungs. The smell of hemp becomes rounder, less sharp, with dampness drawing out the plant's old green memory. You wipe the bench more often, not because it is wet, but because dust and damp together make small clinging mats. These details matter. A workroom is never abstract. It is always a negotiation with the hour's conditions. The younger worker asks whether a hank is clean enough, and the answer comes through inspection rather than opinion. You hold it up, separate a thin section, and show the darker flecks still hidden near the middle. He nods, perhaps a little disappointed, and takes it back to the comb. This too is part of learning, the slow acceptance that enough is not a feeling of being tired, but a condition of the material. We can hear that lesson settle. Later, when he brings it again, the fiber falls straighter, and fewer flecks remain. This time the older hand gives a small nod, barely more than a movement of the chin. The boy will remember that nod longer than a speech, because earned approval in a workroom is often brief and deeply felt. You return to your own bundle, but the room has warmed by one small human degree. Skill has moved a little farther along its quiet path. By late afternoon, the rain weakens, though the damp remains. The window shows a blurred street, and the light beyond it is the color of tin. Someone lights the lamp earlier than usual, and the flame makes the hemp look warmer than it feels. Your hands move within that lamp glow, drawing fibers into order while shadows gather under the bench. The day has entered its last long stretch, the one that asks for care without freshness. The bundle in your hand is nearly done, and nearly done is a dangerous place for tired workers. The temptation is to finish quickly, to let the last small knots pass, to believe that what remains hidden will not matter. You resist this gently, you draw the end through once more, turn it, and inspect the lay. A few rough threads come loose and you set them aside with the toe. The finished line is better for the extra minute. There is a kind of kindness in not rushing the last part. It is kindness toward the material, toward whoever handles it next, and toward your own morning self, who will inherit either order or trouble from tonight's choices. Many ordinary jobs are full of this hidden kindness. They leave doors latched, tools cleaned, floors passable, records legible, fibers straight. We recognize it here in the tired hands of the Riga Hemp Heckler. The room begins to close itself around the evening tasks. Rough bundles are covered, finished hanks are gathered into a safer place. Toe is lifted from underfoot, the broom comes out, and its straw bristles whisper through dust and chips. You sweep slowly because fast sweeping fills the room with what you are trying to settle. Dust rises anyway, but less than it might. The air smells briefly stronger, then calms. Clearing the pins is the final conversation with the day's tool. You stand close, bending slightly, and pull the trapped fiber upward from between the iron teeth. Some comes free in small wisps. Some clings near the base and must be teased out with patient fingers. The pins prick now and then, not enough to injure badly, but enough to remind you not to fall asleep while standing. Even tiredness has work left to do. When the heckle is clean, it looks oddly bare, as if the day has been lifted from it. The wooden block remains scarred and dark where hands have worked above it, and the iron teeth stand in rows, simple and upright. You run your eye across them, checking for bends or looseness. Nothing needs repair tonight. That knowledge brings a small release. We can feel it in the shoulders, one burden not carried into morning. The finished hanks are tied and placed for removal, or for storage, until someone comes to take them farther along the chain. They make a soft, dry mass, more orderly than beautiful, though beauty is there if one has learned the room's language. The fibers lie in parallel, each strand one small part of a greater strength. You touch the topmost bundle once, almost absently, and your hand understands the whole day through that touch. Outside, the rain has left the stones dark and shining. When the door opens, the evening smell enters fully. Wet horse, smoke, river, mud, and the faint sweetness of soaked straw. The air cools the face at once. The workroom behind you glows with lamplight and dust, while the lane ahead is dim and reflective. You step from one world into the other, carrying both for a while. The walk home after rain is slower, because the ruts are slick and the puddles hide uneven stones. Lamps and windows make trembling reflections underfoot, and each step breaks a small piece of light. The city sounds muffled, as if the damp has laid a cloth over wheels, voices and doors. You pass warehouses that smell of wood, sacks and cold storage, and you pass walls where water runs in thin dark lines. Riga at evening is a working city washed quieter, not clean exactly, but softened. Your hands are empty now, but they do not feel empty. They remember the weight of bundles, the drag of fiber through pins, and the dry scrape across cracked skin. The body often carries tools after the tools are put down. A sailor may still feel rope, a printer may still feel type. A hemp heckler still feels the comb's resistance long after leaving the bench. We walk with that memory through the wet lane. At home, the coat is hung where it can shed both rain and dust, though the two do not easily separate. The boots leave dark marks near the door. Warmth gathers slowly, from stove, from food, from bodies close in a small room. The smell of hemp enters with you and becomes part of the evening air, mingling with cabbage, bread, damp wool, and smoke. No one needs to ask where you have been. The work announces itself softly. Washing is more welcome after rain because the hands are both dusty and chilled. The water in the basin takes color quickly, and little fibers float on its surface before sinking. You rub the knuckles, the wrists, the places where dust has made pale lines in the skin. A small cut opens briefly under warm water, then settles. The body is being returned, slowly, from workshop to home. The meal is taken with the tired patience of someone who has used the day well enough. You may speak of the rain, the fiber, the quality of a load, or nothing at all for a while. Silence at table is not emptiness, when everyone understands fatigue. It can be a shared kindness, giving each person room to come back into themselves. We sit there quietly, letting the sounds of spoon, bowl, and low fire replace the rasp of the heckle. Later, when the lamp burns lower, the mind may wander back to the workroom, but now the images are softer. The coarse pins no longer demand attention, the bundles no longer resist, the dust no longer catches in the throat. Everything becomes arranged by memory into a gentler order: bench, fiber, window, tool, hand. Sleep begins to smooth the edges. The day becomes less a task than a pattern. In the room near the Daugava, the heckle rests in darkness. Rainwater drips from some roof edge outside, counting slowly without hurry. Finished, hanks wait in their place, covered against damp, while rough bundles sit along the wall. With tomorrow inside them, the stove has gone quiet. The bench cools, the floor holds its dust. Nothing moves except perhaps one loose fiber stirred by air from a hidden crack. And before the next grey morning returns, before boots cross the floor and hands take up the first bundle again, there is this long resting interval in which even the tools seem released from purpose. The city sleeps unevenly, as port cities do, with some men still near the water and some lamps still burning behind warehouse glass. But the Hemp Heckler sleeps, or nearly sleeps, held by the body's deep tiredness and the mind's last slow motion. Draw, lift, turn, and let go. By morning the phrase has left the mind, but the body remembers it, and the Riga Hemp Heckler returns to the bench with the slow obedience of habit. The workroom is colder after rain, and the damp seems to have settled into the very grain of the wood. You touch the bench and feel yesterday beneath your palm, not as memory alone, but as a faint roughness of dust, oil, and fibre caught in the old scratches. We begin again where the tools have waited, in that quiet space between sleep and labour. The first task is not always the first bundle, because wet weather asks the room to be judged before the hemp is handled. You look toward the corners, the covered hanks, the place near the door where damp air gathers low and persistent. A hand passes over the finished fibre without pressing it, feeling for coolness that might mean trouble if it were left too long. The Riga Hemp Heckler does not command the weather, but he learns to make arrangements with it, shifting bundles, opening cloth, and giving air to what must not sour. The stove takes longer this morning, and its heat creeps outward by degrees, warming knees before hands, hands before shoulders, and never quite reaching the floor. Smoke clings briefly near the rafters, then thins. The room smells of wet wool, old ash, and hemp waking from a damp night. You lift a bundle and loosen it, and the fibres do not spring as they might in drier air. They hold together with a faint heaviness, asking for patience before the first pass ever touches iron. A damp bundle can deceive a careless hand. It may draw smoothly at first because moisture keeps the fibres close, but it can hide gum, weakness, and clinging shive that show themselves only when the heckle asks more of them. You begin with smaller portions. The coarse pins take less at once, and you pull with a steadier, lighter force. The sound is duller than usual, less crisp, more like cloth tearing softly in another room, though the fibre is not tearing if the hand is careful. As the morning opens, the Riga Hemp Heckler works not only to clean the hemp, but to learn what the damp has done to it. Some fibre needs airing before fine heckling. Some can proceed if handled slowly. Some should be laid aside, not forgotten, only spared the wrong treatment at the wrong hour. We feel this judgment unfolding in the work, a kind of weather wisdom held in the fingers, made from years of mornings when the river entered the room without knocking. The Daugava gives Riga its trade, but it also gives damp to the walls, to the rope, to the coat collar, and to the fibres that must remain useful. You hear the river indirectly, through the traffic it draws, the carts it feeds, the warehouse doors it keeps opening, and the men who arrive smelling of water and cold boards. In a port city, the river is a road, a storehouse, and a weather-maker all at once. Even at the bench, with iron teeth before you, you are still working beside it. The morning's rhythm comes more slowly, but it comes. Hemp crosses the pins, pauses, slides, and releases a little more cleanly after each pass. Tow gathers in clumps rather than loose wisps, and you pull it free before it packs too tightly at the base of the teeth. Your hands darken slightly with damp dust, a different mark from the pale powder of a dry day. The smell grows stronger where fibres are opened, grassy and sour, with a faint cellar note that belongs to water and stored plants. A younger worker brings a hank that feels too cool, and the older hand does not scold, only lays it aside and opens it gently with the fingers. The lesson is clear enough without a lecture. Finished fiber must be clean, but it must also be dry enough to keep, travel, and take later twisting or spinning without hidden weakness. You watch the hank spread over the bench like pale hair, and for a moment it seems almost alive, needing air, light, and patience before being gathered again. By mid-morning, the room has adjusted itself around the damp. Finished hanks lie farther from the door. Rough bundles are opened in smaller amounts. The stove door is tended now and then, and the air warms enough to lift a faint mist from wet cuffs and coat hems. We settle into this altered day because work is never only the official task. It is the official task, shaped by weather, light, tools, bodies, and the condition of the material that arrives. A cart stops outside, and for a few minutes the lane is full of voices, wheels and the wet scrape of something heavy being shifted. The sound comes through the door and window as a low disturbance, then folds itself into the room's own rhythm. Someone brings news that another load of hemp has reached a nearby warehouse, though its quality is not yet known. The Riga Hemp Heckler hears this with a practical ear, because a new load means more days, more judgment, more dust, and perhaps better fiber if fortune has travelled with it. The bundle in your hands is ready for the finer comb at last. You bring it over carefully, spreading the fibers so they meet the pins evenly, and the first pass gives a thin, clean whisper despite the damp morning. This is encouraging. You draw again, slower than you might on a dry day, letting the pins remove what remains, without pulling the fibers into strain. The long line begins to show itself, not bright, but orderly, and that order is enough to warm the mind a little. There is often a private gladness when difficult material improves under care. It is not pride in conquest. It is closer to relief, the feeling that the hand has found the right agreement with what resisted it. You smooth the fiber over your wrist, feel its weight and coolness, and lay it where air can pass through it before tying. We stay with that small gladness because it is one of the ways a long day gives back to the worker. The meal pause comes later than expected because damp work stretches time without seeming to. Bread is eaten near the stove if there is room, and the warmth there gathers everyone in a loose, practical closeness. Steam rises from a cup, and for a moment the smell of warm water and rye softens the stronger hemp in the air. You hold the cup with both hands, not for elegance, but because the fingers have been working in cool fiber all morning, and welcome even modest heat. Talk stays on weather for a while, as it often does among people whose work depends on drying, carrying, storing, and keeping things sound. Someone remembers a winter when river ice held late. Someone else says, spring mud can ruin a road before a load ever reaches the city. The words are plain, but behind them lies a whole working map of fields, ponds, carts, warehouses, and rooms like this one. You listen while chewing slowly, and the room feels larger than its walls. After the meal, the afternoon asks the same care again, and the Riga Hemp Heckler returns to the bench with hands that have warmed but not rested long enough to forget. The fibers opened in the morning are inspected before being tied. A few are turned again through the fine comb, not heavily, just enough to lift out stubborn flecks revealed by better light. The window has brightened slightly. The rain has thinned. Dust begins to rise again, no longer pinned down by dampness. The afternoon's first dry-sounding pass through the heckle changes the mood. The pins sing a little sharper. Toe falls lighter. The hemp lifts more freely when shaken, and the whole room seems to exhale as if the weather has loosened its grip. You do not trust this too quickly, because hidden damp may remain, but the body feels the difference and welcomes it. A day that began heavily can still find a cleaner rhythm before evening. A good worker does not become careless when things improve. That may be one of the gentlest truths of the trade. When the hemp begins to move easily, the temptation is to move faster. Yet speed can break fibers just as surely as impatience did in the morning. You keep the draw even, let the pins do their sorting, and allow the finished line to gather slowly. We can feel the discipline of not rushing relief. The workroom sounds sharpen with the drying air. The broom in the corner scratches more crisply. The wooden bench gives a clearer knock when a tool is set down. Even the footfalls on the boards seem less muffled. The hemp scent changes too, losing some of its sour heaviness and returning to a drier, straw-like smell that clings to the mouth and throat. You drink when you can because dust has its own thirst. A merchant's sample, perhaps wrapped separately, may be brought in for checking, and this small bundle receives more attention than its size suggests. It may represent a lot waiting elsewhere, or a question about grading, or a dispute no worker in the room has caused, but someone must help resolve. The Riga Hemp Heckler opens it with the same tools and the same hands used for ordinary bundles. Because fiber does not care about paperwork, it reveals itself only through touch, light, and patient handling. You draw a portion through the coarse teeth, and the answer is mixed. The length is fair, but the preparation uneven. The color is acceptable in places, darker in others. There is more shive than the outer look promised. These observations may become a brief spoken report, but before speech, they are sensations in the hand. The bundle has told its story through resistance. You have listened with fingers rather than ears. Such moments remind us that manual knowledge can be exact without sounding scholarly. The heckler may not use formal terms for every condition, yet his judgment has consequences for price, use, and reputation. He knows what will clean well, what will waste heavily, and what may disappoint later if sent forward under too fine a name. In this room, expertise wears dusty sleeves. It stands at the bench and rubs fiber between thumb and forefinger. The sample is set aside, and the day returns to ordinary work. Ordinary is not lesser here. It is where most skill lives. You take up the next bundle, loosen it, divide it, and bring the first portion to the pins. The sound of the draw returns, steady and low. Outside, a break in the clouds sends a paler light through the window, and for a little while the dust seems almost golden above the bench. As afternoon lengthens, the Riga Hemp Heckler's mind may drift toward home, though the hands stay faithful to the work. You think of whether the coat will dry by morning, whether there is enough fuel, whether bread must be bought on the way, whether someone at home will ask about the rain. These thoughts do not interrupt the combing. They travel beside it, like quiet companions walking the same road. Then a snag in the fiber brings you back fully, and the room narrows again to the pins. A difficult knot near the end of the bundle requires patient teasing. You set the fiber down, separate the strands with both hands, and pull away a few short pieces already too broken to save. The remaining length is drawn again through the finer pins, and this time it falls straighter, though thinner than you hoped. Not every effort restores what has been lost. Still, you saved what could be saved, and that is often the true boundary of honest work. The younger worker sweeps again, and the floor briefly shows its boards before dust and fiber reclaim them. He gathers tow into a sack or loose pile, pressing it down with both hands, and the tow springs back slightly, stubborn in its own light way. He coughs once from the dust and turns his face aside. No one makes much of it. The room contains such sounds constantly, small bodily responses to work that has filled the air all day. Late in the afternoon, a narrow shaft of sun finally enters under the cloud edge and rests across the bench like a warmer piece of cloth. The hemp in that light seems paler, almost silver where the fibers are longest and cleanest. You turn a finished hank through it slowly, letting the sun show what the lamp would hide. Dark specks appear more clearly. A few are lifted out. The rest of the hank holds together well, and you lay it aside with quiet approval. There are days when the satisfaction of the work comes not from ease, but from bringing a difficult day to a decent finish. This has been such a day. Damp in the morning, better air in the afternoon, mixed fiber, extra clearing, slower progress, but still the finished hanks have gathered. We can feel the kind of tiredness that follows such labor. Heavier than yesterday, perhaps, but not bitter. The day asked more, and the hands answered as well as they could. The final hour begins with decisions. Which bundle can be completed before stopping? Which should wait? Which finished fiber needs covering? Which tool requires attention? The Riga Hemp Heckler makes these choices with a mind made practical by long repetition, knowing that a poor ending becomes tomorrow's first irritation. You choose one manageable portion, not too rough, not too damp, and bring it through the comb in the lamplight that has just been kindled. The lamp's glow softens the roughness of everything but the pins. They remain exact. The flame puts amber along the fiber, darkens the bench scratches, and makes the toe below look deeper and softer than it is. Shadows move with your arm, passing over wood and iron in slow waves. We remain in that golden island of work, while outside the wet city lowers itself toward evening. When the last bundle is finished, the room's purpose turns toward keeping. Hanks are tied with care, not crushed, not loose. Covers are placed where damp might creep. Tools are cleared with the same patience that opened the fiber earlier, because ending well is a continuation of the day's work, not a separate chore. You lift fibers from the pins, feel the iron's cold points against tired fingers, and remove each trapped wisp until the heckle stands clean. The floor is swept slowly, and the broom's path carries the day into a small gathered mound. Dust, shive, broken ends, straw, grit from boots, and crumbs of bread all meet there, evidence of labor and life sharing the same boards. You look at it only briefly before it is moved aside. The room is never made new by sweeping. It is made ready, which is a humbler and more useful thing. At the doorway, evening comes in damp, but not raining, smelling of cooling stone, smoke, horse, and the wide dark river. You step out with the others, or after them, depending on the day's arrangement, and the workroom remains behind with its covered hanks and cooling stove. The city's sounds have thinned, wheels are fewer, voices travel farther. Somewhere, water drips from a roof with a slow patience that seems to echo the combing itself. The walk home passes through the same streets, yet after a day of damp hemp, they feel newly clean against the face. The air moves over the skin and clears some dust from the throat. Your boots avoid puddles when they can, and accept them when they must. Window light appears in low rooms. A door opens, releasing the smell of soup, wet wool, and smoke. You carry the workshop with you, but the evening begins to carry you away from it. Home receives the tired body in fragments. First the coat is removed, then the boots. Then the hands are washed, slowly, with attention to cracks and nails. Water darkens, fibers loosen. The smell fades but does not vanish. We sit beside you in that ordinary restoration, where the worker becomes again not only a worker, but a person at a table, a person near a stove, a person whose hands have done enough for one day. Later, when the lamp at home burns low, the mind may return to the morning's damp bundle and the afternoon's improving light. It may remember the sample that looked better than it was, the knot that could not fully be saved, the younger worker's better tie, and the final clean row of pins. These thoughts drift without urgency. They pass like river reflections in darkness, lengthening, breaking, and rejoining in the mind's slow current. Sleep comes with the body heavy and the hands quiet. The room at home softens, and the sounds beyond the wall grow less distinct. Somewhere in the city, someone is still awake near the harbor, because ports do not sleep all at once. But the Hemp Heckler's day has finished. The bench is behind him. The tools are in darkness. The fiber is covered. The last motion of the mind is a gentle pull through iron teeth, and then even that lets go. In the workroom, through the night, damp air tests the coverings and settles against the door. The stove is cold. The heckle stands clean, its pins upright and silent. The finished hanks wait with their long fibers aligned, holding the day's labor in stillness. Rough bundles lean nearby, unchanged in the dark, keeping tomorrow's resistance inside them. Nothing is wasted by waiting. Waiting is part of the work too. By the time another morning begins, the city has turned slightly, though the room appears the same. A new light, a new chill, a different smell from the street. The Riga Hemp Heckler enters again, and the day's first breath carries smoke, damp, and the dry promise of fiber. You take your place at the bench with us, not as a stranger now, but as someone who has learned the room's quiet grammar. The pins wait, and the first bundle waits, and the work begins again in the only way it can, slowly.